All right. Good evening, everybody. Um, Hopefully, the audio quality is going to be a little better tonight than it has been in the past. Let me know if it's coming through loud and clear. And as Ryan said, happy 2020, happy New Year, and yeah. So hope everybody had a good holiday season. Um, and I hope everybody's also had a chance to go and listen to the new piece I posted today. Beautiful Desolation. Um, and that is a piece for solo F alto saxophone or mezzo soprano saxophone, if you will, and wind ensemble. And uh, I just completed that piece this afternoon, and it's in editing stage right now. But that piece just it was one of those. It did not want to come out. I knew it was there, and I kind of knew what it was going to sound like, but I finally got it to where I think it works, and I'm already in talks with Dr. Paul Cohen to premiere the piece hopefully later this year. We're kind of working out some details on that, pending one particular university situation. What is it a tone poem on? It is reflective of the desert southwest of Texas. And in particular, the concept was developed as I was heading to my uncle's funeral last year. So, yeah, it's kind of an in memoriam piece for him, where he lived down right along the Rio Grande in Southwest Texas. But anyway, so yeah, tonight we are going to be talking about keyboard instruments within the wind ensemble, and of course the orchestra as well, and talk about that. Oh, but before we get to that, let's do something a little bit fun, and I can show you some 3D printing progress here. I have the first half of the 3D printed serpent that I am working on. I've got another couple pieces printing right now. The whole thing is in 24 pieces. So this is one single piece here, then this, and then like each curve is in 4 pieces. So it takes a while, and I can print. I've got 2 on the printer going right now, and it'll sound some, but it's not great. The finger holes do not do diddly squat, and I'm hoping that changes once I get the next little bit put on. But yeah. Okay, so we've got keyboard questions. Glad, cool. I'm glad you like the new piece. I tend to like it too. Ryan wants to know how Stravinsky uses the piano in the Firebird and Petrushka. Well, he uses them differently in both pieces. So I've got Petrushka right here. And Petrushka, the piano is kind of a soloist. So I'm just going to kind of go through it. And he right here on the second page of the score, he's just using the piano to kind of reinforce the violins. Some extra flourishes here to reinforce the woodwinds. But overall, this is actually a really good score to look at for orchestral piano writing, because he does go back and forth between it being an ensemble instrument, which it is here throughout the first few pages, and then it develops into a solo instrument. And let me see if I can tell you where it goes to being a solo instrument. Yes, Ratchet, this is the Dover edition. I'd have to look at it a bit more, but So Stravinsky's going back and forth in this between it being a solo instrument and an ensemble instrument. And when it's being an ensemble instrument, it's functioning much more like a percussion instrument. And John Williams does this quite a bit too. The piano is there a lot of times with John Williams. It's to reinforce the upper woodwinds. Let's see. Was there a specific genre of music that the keyboard was meant to be used in? Well, it depends on which kind of keyboard instrument you're talking about, because that keyboard will cover everything from organ all the way up to a modern synthesizer. So you might have to, Alessandro, frame that question a little bit more specifically. On Martineau, we talked a little bit about on Martineau 2 weeks ago, Aster. Yes, it is a keyboard instrument, but it functions much more like an electronic instrument. It's a hybrid. Thank you, Sweeter. I'm glad you like it. The Dover editions are just reprints of out of copyright works. The Stravinsky is interesting because Stravinsky, most of the early stuff is out of copyright in the U.S. but nowhere else in the world. Harpsichord. Okay, so Harpsichord. Ryan, where should we start with Harpsichord? Harpsichord has a very long and weird history. Aster, it should still be up where you can just go watch the whole thing. Ryan, I would suggest go find David Bruce's video about the harpsichord. He calls it Historical Pickle. But that is a really good overview of it. So the harpsichord, it was one of the first kind of portable string instruments, because an organ's not portable. So what it is, it's a keyboard instrument with strings, and instead of a hammer hitting the string, it's a plucking device. So it's almost like a guitar where it plucks the string. And harpsichords go back into the early 1600s, probably into the late 1500s. I'm not sure the exact date. I haven't done the research yet for the harpsichord chapter in the upcoming volume 4, but I will be doing that at some point. It probably won't be an extensive chapter because it is just covering wind band stuff. Oh, and by the way, if you want to see some of those upcoming chapters, I am posting, every time I complete a chapter, I am posting that over on Patreon for patrons exclusively. So once a week or so, you'll get a couple new chapters for upcoming both volumes 4 and 5 of band orchestration. Okay, somebody just drove by playing very loud Tejano music. It was great. So harpsichord was really kind of there. One of its main jobs was to fill out the harmony in ensembles, and accompaniment as well. One of the things... Okay, there's a lot of questions coming in. I will try and get to them as I can. Ryan's just asked a super, super detailed question, and it's going to take a while for me to mumble it out. But anyway, so yeah, the harpsichord's main role was accompaniment, filling in harmony, and it did that throughout the Baroque era and into the classical era. Most people don't realize this, but early Mozart, early Haydn all had harpsichord parts in them. As the orchestra grew, the harpsichord parts would get dropped. Case in point, I performed several years ago Mozart's opera Così fan tutte, and we used a harpsichord with it. So he was using harpsichord at least that late into the operas with the recitatives. The harpsichord, by the time of Beethoven, though, was gone. And harpsichords were passé. There's a story that the French Conservatory at one point just took all the harpsichords and burned them for firewood to keep warm. And so the harpsichords just disappeared. And one of the reasons they disappeared is their lack of the ability to do dynamics. A harpsichord cannot play dynamics. It is just straight. And this worked really well with Baroque music, not so much with the emerging Romantic music. It did okay early classical, but as it progressed, the instrument didn't work. However, honestly, we can credit Richard Strauss for reintroducing the harpsichord. He would go out of his way when he was conducting a Mozart opera to make sure he had a harpsichord. And so Strauss would use a harpsichord and even conduct from it. And he did reintroduce it into the orchestra, and I believe his opera Capriccio, there is a harpsichord part from Richard Strauss. And since that time, more and more composers have been using the harpsichord. There are some issues, though, with modern music for harpsichord, which David Bruce's video talks about quite extensively, that the Baroque harpsichord is great for Baroque music, but it doesn't do the modern stuff really well. I personally have scored harpsichord in one piece. There's a pretty substantial harpsichord part in Symphony 3, and the player actually has to double on harpsichord and harmonium. Okay, I hope that gets some answer of it. But if you have any more specifics, ask. I will do my best to answer, but it is a complicated history. Sweeter said, been looking for a sample kit of one of the modern harpsichords he talks about in that video. Yeah, I'd love to get a harpsichord kit and build one. I wonder if I could 3D print a harpsichord. Huh. I know there are parts that you can 3D print, but I don't think the whole thing. Okay, how does an organ function in an ensemble? Okay, so I'm going to do Ratchet's question first because it's a lot easier. There's a reason Ratchet's question is a lot easier. And so he asks, what is a harmonium? Right, pardon the noise, but behind me, this is a harmonium. That's all it is. This is a reed organ. It's got stops on it. So this particular one has 4 bass stops, 4 treble stops, and then some effects here. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull out the 2 main stops on the bass and treble end. So yeah, that's a harmonium, also called a reed organ, pump organ. Now it's called a pump organ because it's supposed to be operated with foot bellows, but somebody disabled the foot bellows on my harmonium, which means I have to have that noisy motor on there. At some point, I am going to take out the motor, reinstall the foot bellows. But that will be a project and one I am not really ready to do yet. But that's a harmonium. It's a reed organ. And yeah, it does appear in quite a few classical pieces, particularly right around 1900, within like 10 years either side. There's a Schoenberg piece. Richard Strauss uses it occasionally. Mahler uses it in Symphony 8. Mahler Symphony 8 has 2 organ parts in it, which is pretty darn incredible. Okay, so back to Ryan's question. How does an organ function in an ensemble? Couple different ways. One is it is a soloist. And this goes back to the Baroque era when you had something like a Handel organ concerto, which I've played one of those before. Quite nice. So it just functions as a solo instrument, and in this case it would function. In the Baroque era, it was functioning very much like the harpsichord did as well, just filling out harmonies and whatnot. Um, However, if you want to look at how it's used in a more modern setting, we start with something like Saint-Saëns Organ Symphony. Let's see. Do I have that within reach? Yeah. All right. Get yourself a copy of Camille Saint-Saëns Symphony Number 3, the Organ Symphony, and study kind of what he does with the organ. This is the first major orchestral work to include an organ in it. And you would get some other pieces right around the same time. There's some Liszt stuff. There's a Tchaikovsky piece. I'm trying to think when this was done. This is 1886. And so right around then, the organ was getting introduced. So this is one of the first major pieces. I'm thinking Mahler 2 had it around that same time. I think Mahler 2 is actually earlier than this. So a couple things. You can use it as a soloist, and in that case, what am I talking about? There's a more important work from earlier with organ in it. And that's Hector Berlioz's Te Deum. Of course, Berlioz's Te Deum. Okay, that's actually a really good place to start. Is look at Berlioz's Te Deum, because in the Te Deum, he wanted the organ and the orchestra placed at opposite ends of the performance hall, typically a cathedral. So organ's over here, orchestra's over here, and they play call and response to each other. Boom, 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 and the opening chords are really evocative of this. Just whole note echo in the distance, and the Te Deum works really quite well for that. You can also use the organ to bring in extra power. Think about something like the finale to Respighi's Pines of Rome, or the finale to Mahler 8, or Mahler 2. Both of those bring in the organ at the end. Although the Mahler, he uses the organ really kind of throughout. So that's a little bit different. The Mahler 8, anyway. Then you've got someone like Holst in the Planets with the organ there. And the organ there is mostly adding extra bass notes that the orchestra can't play. I know Richard Bobo's talked a lot about this. Most of the times when you perform the Planets, you don't actually do it with the organ. I didn't when I performed it. And you can either just leave it out or use a synthesizer. But the synthesizer, of course, can never reproduce those low notes with the gut vibrating quality you need. Neptune is great. Yeah, and as Ratchet says, End of Mars. There's a great glissando. Where's the glissando? Is that in... It's in Uranus. How different are clavichords from harpsichords? Functionally, they're cousins. A clavichord, though, is not meant for a concert hall. A clavichord is meant for home use only. It's only about this big. But the one thing a clavichord can do is it can do vibrato. You can touch the note and then you can wiggle it back and forth, and you will actually be able to produce a vibrato on a clavichord, which is quite nice. But they are extremely quiet instrument. So they're not something that you will bring to a concert hall. Though, I believe there was one acoustical engineer when they were designing concert halls and the sound system that would go in concert halls. They would go on stage, bring a clavichord, and if you could hear the clavichord at the back of the hall, they had designed it right. And so they use that kind of as a test because it's so quiet. Uh, Ryan, you're wanting to go so fast. I kind of want to linger on stuff. Can we? We will get to Celeste, yes, but not yet. The electroacoustic clavinova isn't far from a harpsichord. Yeah, it's probably much more closer in sound to a harpsichord. There aren't as many strings. Yeah, you might only have two, three octaves. You are correct, Ratchet. Yes, you cannot play minor seconds on it. So it's kind of in that um, same vein as the harp, in that you can only play one note on a string, so it can do C, C sharp, or C flat. Sorry, you guys had to deal with politics. We don't do politics on this channel. User has been banned. Um. Anyway, yes, I would have to go really kind of into some of the more details and the inner workings of a clavichord. Um, you don't see them very often anymore. They're just kind of a home instrument. Have I heard of the fluid piano? No, I have not. Do I think a Rhodes or Wurlitzer would be good in a standard classical ensemble? If the composer wrote a part for those instruments, sure. They would be interesting instruments to experiment with. I would have to play around with the Rhodes or Wurlitzer really to kind of understand them, to figure out what use they could be. But yeah, it's not even a piano. It's actually a clavichord, which is kind of cool. You can change the tuning of the strings on the fly. Each string has a movable bridge. Okay, yeah, it's something I'd have to look into. When you get into the realm of keyboard instruments, you start getting so many different side branches that it becomes a never-ending story. Which I love that movie as a kid. Okay, so let's go back to organ real quick. So adding an organ is like adding a whole second orchestra to the orchestra or the wind band, and in that, it's the great line: "With great power comes great responsibility." So it's like Spider-Man, and a little bit of organ goes a long way. Case in point, I was attending a performance of a friend of mine's symphony a couple months ago, and the conductor had asked him to add an organ part to it. And I was sitting next to him, and just kind of blown away by the sound. But the thing is, the sound was there throughout the whole last movement of it, and he said it works. It's a little heavy, and it probably should just come in at the end instead of all the way through. It's like, yeah, I kind of agree with that. If it's there, it just needs to be smaller. And so it's one of those. The organ part was great, but it was almost too much at times, and that's a very hard line to walk. I Clavinova, as mentioned before, maybe even a Hammond with a Leslie speaker. Sweeter, what exactly is a Leslie speaker? I don't know that. Have I heard of organstops.com? I think I've been there a few times. I've never spent a lot of time on there. Let's talk a little bit about organ writing, what I do. That's what I figured it was. It was just kind of catalog of organ stops. So when I'm writing for organ, there are a couple things that I will make sure to put on there. One, I want to put what what octave it's going to be in. So organs have 8 foot, 16 foot, 4 foot. It's always in some division of that. So 8 foot is your standard range. It's based on the lowest note on the manual, the keyboard. So the lowest note is an 8 foot C, which is C2. And the organ manual is 5 octaves. It goes from C2 to C7. Yeah, C2 to C7. So 5 octaves. Really standard. If I want to do 16 feet, that's down an octave. So the 16-foot C is the lowest C on the piano. A 32-foot C, which only the big organs have, is an octave lower still, and that's in the range of Richard's subcontrabassoon. Helicopter mentions a 32, a 64-foot stop. There are two organs in the world that have a true 64-foot stop. The 64-foot stop is C negative 1. It's an octave below where Richard's subcontrabassoon would be. It's an insanely stupid thing, and it is it's not used often, and there, as someone mentioned, yes, it can actually be destructive to the foundation of the building. There are one of the organs that has the 64-foot in it. They do not let it be used in practice. It's only a performance, and that's just because they don't want to loosen the mortar of the bricks. So it vibrates the whole building. Interesting ratchet. So it should be chair and not choir. Huh. Okay. Leslie is a speaker with rotating horns. You'd surely recognize the sound if you heard one. It inspired other electronic effects. Okay. Yeah, the Sydney Town Hall, and I think the other true 64 is at the big pipe organ in Atlantic City. I could be wrong. There may be what a resultant 64 at there's a church in England, and I believe they may have a resultant. And a resultant is when you instead of having a true 64-foot stop, you have a 32-foot C and then a G above that, and play those two together will give you a resultant pitch of an octave lower. All right. Ephraim, we're talking keyboards tonight. If you'd like to talk bassoons, just message me somewhere and we can talk that. Cohort bassoons in general are okay. It depends on the quality of the instrument. That's about all I'll say tonight on that. Almost all gospel organ is modulated via Leslie speakers. Yeah, so I'll have to look into what a Leslie speaker is and does. So it's just that gets into an area that I just don't know as well as I should. Yeah, so and the Atlantic City organ is the largest organ in the world. And last I knew, and this has been several years, it wasn't fully functional because they had just kind of let it decay and didn't use it. It was it wasn't maintained well, but good pipe organ will go a long way. I like using pipe organ in a wind band, and one thing it will do is it'll add that infinite sustain that wind instruments can't. Leslie speaker horns rotate at different speeds and can be controlled expressively. Keyboard battery ran out. Yeah, I do know what the wave organ you're talking about. Yes, that's one controlled actually by the tides coming in and going out. Okay, Ryan, you want to talk Celeste and you just don't want to be patient about it. We're going to get there. Um, so, before we get there, I do want to cover a little bit of harmonium because I do have it here, and it's kind of the next logical step from organ. So the harmonium is basically a portable organ. This only uses reeds, so it's essentially. Okay, Ryan, I'm going to put you in timeout for a while. I've already said we will get there, but be patient. Okay, so the harmonium is essentially just the reed stops on an organ, and I haven't actually gotten into the inner workings of this particular harmonium to kind of figure them out. So there are no pipes; they're just reeds. And I'm going to turn it on, so forgive the buzz. And okay, so I'm going to just play with two stops here. So I've got the diapason. Okay, sorry, I've got to do some moderating because we've got some people here who don't know how to behave. So the diapason is just the standard. So this note right here, the lowest note is F1. And what I can do, I can also add in the principal stop. And that adds an extra octave up. So this is an 8-foot and a 4-foot together. Jared, no, I can't. It's built in. So this basically has an 8-foot and a 4-foot, which means it can go from F1 down here. The highest note up here is going to be 5 octaves higher. So that would be F6, but because I can do a 4-foot on there, I can get an F8 out. So I'm going to turn that off because, yeah, it is super annoying. And it also, there's some kind of smell inside of it that every time I turn it on. But yeah, it's the same range as a harpsichord. So roughly F1 to F6 is the same. Reeds that vibrate air over. Yeah, it's a giant melodica, which is that's all it is a giant melodica. But I can do changes on it. Now, I will show you some of the other features on here, and I won't turn it on. All right, so there are knee pedals here, or knee levers. And what these do is that if you press them out, they open up gates inside of it. And well, I will turn it on, and I'm just gonna play a chord. affect your dynamics. So they can close or open. So with it in its neutral position, it's like halfway closed. And then this opens them all the way up. And so this will get you a louder sound. But if I don't want to mess with that, what I have here is I have two stops here that are called forte stops, and they just automatically open the gates all the way. There is a center knob here. This is called Vox Humana, and Vox Humana will turn on a motor. Yes, exactly. It's a vibraphone motor, basically. Yeah. So at the bottom of a barrel of plastic. So yeah, this is like a vibraphone motor. It will put a spinner on it, and it will put a vibrato on here. Unfortunately, the Vox Humana on this organ does not work. I've got to figure out how to get it working, but it will at some point. But so that's kind of what that does. And large pipe organs will also have a Vox Humana as well. And it's just a vibrator. A vibrating function, a vibrato function. Watch what I say. Okay. All right. Okay. We will now move to the celeste, or celesta. Okay. So it's hopefully, Ryan is out of timeout by now, should be. Okay, so the celesta is a keyboard instrument that has hammers hitting metal bars, and underneath each of those metal bars is a resonator. So it's kind of like a keyboard vibraphone without the vibes. And so it will sound much more vibraphone-like. The one of the differences, though, is the bars on the celeste are made of steel. The bars on the vibraphone are made of aluminum. So you'll get some overtone differences between the two. The celeste will tend to have much more overtones. Not as many overtones, though, as a glockenspiel. And so glockenspiel is ultra bright, then the celeste, then the vibraphone, if you kind of want to look at it on a brightness scale. The celeste was introduced into the orchestra in the 1880s, and there's actually it was a piece by I believe Massenet that called for it first. It's not the Nutcracker as most people think, to use the celeste first. In fact, the Nutcracker wasn't even Tchaikovsky's first time to use the celeste. There is a much more obscure tone poem by Tchaikovsky called the Voyevoda, where he uses the celeste in a much different way than he does in Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairies. He uses it much more, almost like a harp, which is really kind of unusual. But celeste is, interestingly, been used in a lot of... The Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy is for celeste. It's not for keyboard Glock. It is absolutely for celeste. Tchaikovsky had a celeste delivered secretly for the performance of it, and actually he used it first for the Voyevoda. Nutcracker calls for a glass harmonica. I don't think so. The piece from that time that uses the glass harmonica is Carnival of the Animals. I don't think I've seen a glass harmonica part in the Nutcracker, but somebody might correct me. I don't have the full Nutcracker score on hand. I just have the suite, but the Carnival of the Animals definitely does. Oh, interesting point with the glass harmonica and Carnival of the Animals. I have a recording somewhere that the orchestra went out of their way to not only not use a glass harmonica, but they use a just regular harmonica. And it is the most obnoxious thing. You're going through and listening to an aquarium, and all of a sudden, there's a harmonica playing, like a mouth organ. It's like, what the actual? Why do they do it? Somebody was convinced that Cezanne wanted that part played on an actual harmonica. And I don't know why. Okay. There's a piano. Yeah, that's the Bosendorfer Grand Imperial. Mostly those extra strings down there are used for resonance. They'll just give a little bit extra body to the tone, particularly when you put the pedal down, so you get much more ring down there. You don't actually play them very often. Ryan, yes, that is a Naxos recording. Can you think of a piece with the extra cutting power the keyboard Glock is actually needed? There are several pieces that use keyboard Glock. So any of the French pieces that call for the French term for the keyboard glockenspiel is jeu de timbre, which means play of the bells, and which obviously is what glockenspiel means too in German. But jeu de timbre always means a keyboard Glock. So Ducas, Sorcerer's Apprentice, or Debussy's La Mer, Ravel, anything from Ravel is all keyboard Glock. Messiaen Tarangalila is a keyboard Glock. And that one's interesting. It's a keyboard Glock, and a celeste, and a piano, and an Ond Martineau. So you've got 4 keyboard players for that one piece. And I'm trying to think. And the only other piece I know that requires full 4 keyboard players is Mahler 8. You need an organ, harmonium, celeste, and a piano. Yeah, so keyboard Glock is very, very bright. It's got very hard mallets on the hammers, whereas on the celeste you have much softer mallets. Is there a difference between keyboard Glock and celeste? Absolutely, there is. There is a great video demonstrating the differences between the two from LA Percussion Rental. I would highly suggest going and looking that up. Just type in keyboard Glockenspiel, and it should be one of the top videos that comes up. Okay, so you've been learning Sorcerer's Apprentice all your life. Well, here's the thing. I have played Sorcerer's Apprentice before, and you're not going to actually get a keyboard Glock for that. You're going to be using a regular Glockenspiel. But it was designed to be played on a keyboard. Yep. So much easier on the keyboard. And Ducas knew what he was doing there because everybody at the time in France was using the keyboard Glock, not the mallet Glock. So, yeah. And so Ravel, Debussy, early Messiaen, later Messiaen, he would start using an actual Glockenspiel. And so later Messiaen scores will actually say Glockenspiel and not jeu de timbre. Let me see what Tarangalila says. Does he actually say... yeah, so he says timbre and celeste. So timbre is the keyboard Glock. Yeah, it makes a lot more sense if you know what instrument he was using. Same with Ducas using sarrusophone over contrabassoon. The part makes actually much more sense on sarrusophone than on contrabassoon. Okay, so Celeste. Um, so eh, there are some range issues with Celestes. A standard Celeste is 4 octaves from written C3 up to C8, sounding an octave higher. So the lowest note sounding is middle C up to the top C of the piano. However, most modern celestes are now made with 5 octaves or even 5.5 octaves, adding an extra octave down on the low end so that it'd be down to a written low C2, sounding C3, and occasionally on the upper end you might have it go all the way up to a written F8, which would sound F no written F7 sounding F8, a fourth above the piano's range, so way up there. Um, that kind of sound that works up in that range, but you don't want to go too much higher than that. Yes, we will do a harp stream in the future, Helicopter. That one will be much more difficult to do. Harp is just stupid hard to write for. Okay. Um, so, yeah. So, you can, if you're writing for Celeste, it is wise to limit yourself to the 4 octaves. But if you want to venture down into that low fifth octave, um, yeah, and as Ratchet said, most professional orchestras have a 5 octave celeste. But I would still keep it to the range of a 4 octave. Celestes are not cheap. It's something stupid like 40 grand to get a new Schiedmeyer Celeste. It's just they're insanely expensive for what they are. Interestingly, were a lot of pop tunes in like the 50s, 60s that would use Celeste on them. So occasionally you're listening and you might hear a Celeste on the radio. And I guess some studio player happened to have one at the studio. They would use it every now and then. Particularly, you hear it so much in Christmas music. It's kind of become one of those ubiquitous Christmas sounds. It's like the world's most the fanciest music box in the world, basically. Um, I quite like the Celeste, but with the Celeste, I think the motto is a little bit goes a long way. Um, Tchaikovsky in the Nutcracker only brings in the Celeste in the Sugar Plum Fairies, which is at the very end of the ballet. And that's, you have to wait an hour and a half before you hear the Celeste. I thought about trying to convert my glockenspiel into a keyboard, but I'm not capable of doing a great job at it. There is a video online that shows you how to do it. It's a lot of woodworking skills, but it's entirely possible. Has there ever been a Celeste that went below written C2? Not to my knowledge. At some point with the Celeste type bars, the lower you go, the less effectual it becomes. The lowest C on a 5 octave Celeste is almost all overtones. You're not hearing any of the fundamental. So if you keep going lower and lower, it's just going to be more and more overtones and less fundamental, to the point where you don't hear the pitch anymore. You just hear the ring. So it just is not, it's not worth the maker's while to go down any lower. There are, getting any kind of mallet instrument um, to go down into the bass range, there are some limits of physics of what it can do. The lowest I've seen effectively, and um, to go down there is about an F1 on the Mexican marimbas, and that works pretty well. On keyboards, why 7 white and 5 black? Well, I mean, I guess it could be the other way. Harpsichords typically the natural row is the dark color, and the accidental row is the light color. But I mean, it's our scales are based on 7-note scales with the top one repeating for the octave. Uh, Big bells, but resonating in different ways. Okay, yeah. So like bell tones, yeah, like the big bells, yeah. So yeah, you're just gonna be getting overtones, and you don't have enough inertia to get a fundamental pitch on them. Your college has a Schiedmeyer Celeste sitting in the wind ensemble room. That is that's a shame. But finding someone who can actually repair it is very difficult. There are probably very few technicians out there who can fully repair a good pro quality Celeste. There's a lot of moving parts, and they're not easy to fix. Do I consider the accordion a keyboard instrument? Yes and no, depending on the kind of accordion. I mean, there's two kinds of accordions. There is a keyboard accordion, and there's a button accordion. I guess you could call it essentially the keyboard. The accordion is a portable harmonium, which is a more portable organ. So in the same realm there, accordion has been used. There, interestingly, is a Tchaikovsky piece. Of all things, there's a Tchaikovsky piece that calls for 3 accordions. I kid you not. I believe there's also a Prokofiev piece that calls for an accordion section as well. So, I'd have to remember which Prokofiev piece that is. It's one of the cantatas, I believe, though. And it may be a Shostakovich piece, but it's one of those two. It's definitely Russian. But it's one of the. There are 4. Tchaikovsky wrote 4 orchestral suites, and Suite 1, 2, 3, 4, and I think it's Suite number 4 that uses the 3 accordions. And I'll have to look at that. I will definitely include that in Volume 4 when I get to it. Interestingly, back to mentioning David Bruce's videos again, is he is starting to really come around to using accordion, and it's a highly versatile instrument. I would love to talk to a real accordion player. In fact, I have a friend who is an accordion fanatic, and maybe I'll talk to him. Maybe if he's not busy, we could do a stream just on accordion. Really super interesting guy. He's devoted his life to preserving music of the 1920s, 1910s and 20s, and so he does a lot of. That's it, Ratchet. Yeah, the cantata for the 20th anniversary of the October Revolution, and that's Prokofiev, right? Or is that Shostakovich? I think it's Prokofiev. There are some very weird pieces of the Soviet era that are probably good pieces, but because okay, bass harmonica, yes, okay, helicopter bass harmonica is interesting. If you want to really hear a bass harmonica played, the place I'm going to suggest going is, if you ever see the movie A Christmas Story, the background music in a few of the scenes is bass harmonica. And particularly where he's fighting off the bandits in his memory, you listen, and it's just this cool, funky sound. I love the sound of bass harmonica. Yes, the politics. Yeah, the, it would be, you know, I think music has a right to be political. The problem is once those politics change, the music may no longer be appropriate. And we see that with several of Shostakovich's symphonies. You're not going to play Shostakovich Symphony 4 very often just because of its nature. Um, and love an accordion string. Okay, yeah, you know what? I will reach out to my friend Matt and I will see if I can set something up. I know he's usually super busy and he's moved across the country, but I think I might be able to do something there. Bass melodeons are the best melodicas too. Oh, I mean, bass anything is awesome. I mean, I think we can all agree on that. He says with a bassoon and an ophicleide and a bass recorder behind him, and a bari sax next to him. Oh, there's a bass clarinet there and a serpent. I got a few bass instruments next to me. Got a great bass clarinet coming at some point. We'll see what happens there. But anyway. All right. Let's see. What other keyboard instruments have we not talked about? We haven't really talked piano much, have we? The guitar one will happen soon. Yes. Michael's just super busy, and he's got to do some work actually for Ariana Grande right now. So we're working on that one. Prepared piano. Okay, that's a good one. Prepared piano. So, a lot of people have this conception that prepared piano is basically you just throw a bunch of shit in the piano and hope it sounds good. That's not what's going on, though. So, prepared piano is, well, you do take that bunch of shit and put it in the piano, but it is very, very specific on how you do it and what you put in there, where you put it in. A lot of it is it's getting buzzes or rattles, or it's producing harmonics, and it's really cool. And one of the concepts is to turn the piano into a gamelan, Balinese gamelan, or Indonesian or Javan gamelan, just whichever gamelan you want. Apparently, Cal wrote a piece for wind ensemble and piano. Interesting. If you can find a link for that to me, Ratchet, and send it to me on the Discord. I want to look at that. If it's not there, I will talk to Dr. Cohen, and he knew Henry Cowell or worked with him at some point. And he may know, but we'll see if we can find that out. But anyway, so yeah, so the prepared piano, you're putting stuff inside. Yes, this piece requires prepared piano. So if you want prepared piano in a piece and you want regular piano in a piece, you've got to have two pianos. And this is a difficult thing for you can't just go prepared, unprepared. That piano is staying prepared until somebody comes and unprepares it. And so oftentimes you will see two pianos on stage. Another case where this happens is something like Ives. Which Ives symphony is it? Is it Symphony Number 4? I think it's Ives Symphony 4, where he has a regular piano and then a piano tuned to a quarter step sharp. Or a quarter step flat. So it's a quarter step off. And so two pianos going, but it's all, you can do all your hyperchromatic quarter tones. So that's something you can do. There are pieces that do use two pianos. Best example of that is Stravinsky's Symphony of Psalms, and he uses the two pianos essentially where the violins and violas would be, which kind of turns that piece into a weird wind ensemble piece. Adding new materials to hammers, felt pianos are really popular sound. Yeah. Okay, so there is another type of piano that is very, very interesting. It's called a luthial. And a luthial, we would probably forget all about it, except that Maurice Ravel wrote for it once. And Ravel wrote for a luthial in his piece Sagane, which is a solo violin and piano. Well, the luthial wasn't a fully different piano. It was a piano with a stop on it. Basically, you would put the stop on and it would make the instrument sound more like a cimbalom, the Hungarian national instrument that's basically a giant zither. Um, and so you would turn the piano into a cimbalom. Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm getting messages on my phone down here. It's just from Ratchet messaging me off YouTube. But if you go and look, you can find a few videos on YouTube of a luthial being used. It actually, when it's used nowadays, to get the luthial sound, there are some really good samples of it. And so they just use samples on electric keyboard. Because there's only, I think, Lutheal. I believe that's how it's spelled. And there's only one or two working instruments in the world. And what they do is they just take a regular grand piano and then they install the luthial stop on it. Sorry, let me check something real quick. Sorry about that. I thought there was some flashing lights outside my house, but must have just been driving by. So, thoughts on the virginal or the spinet? Not really. I mean, they're early types of keyboard that we don't really see anymore. They're like the clavichord. They're going to be just more chamber music practice instruments. Trying to think. At one point, somebody did make a keyboard vibraphone. That was interesting. And, there's also... Is an electric grand a piano that has distortion? No, an electric grand is just an electric keyboard, basically. I've always wanted to see a piano that mutes the strings like done in a prepared piano. Trying to think if that is done. I think I think that's a thing. It's isn't that what's done on upright pianos? The left the left pedal on a lot of upright pianos, instead of being una corda, is an actual mute. Yeah, I think the Yamaha pianos do that. And, it used to be that pianos had more than 2 or 3 pedals. Beethoven's piano had 7 pedals on it. So it would have a sustain. It would have an una corda. Actually, I don't know if it would have an una corda or not. Una corda, by the way, is where it shifts the keyboard or the strings just a little bit, so you're only hitting one of the 3 strings. But Beethoven also had a bassoon pedal where it put a buzzer on them. And so every note sounded like it had a reed on it, which would be quite cool. I can't remember what all the 7 pedals did on Beethoven's piano, but he would use them, and you would occasionally see markings in his music where you would use those. Okay, lots. The cymbalette and pianette were electric reed pianos from the 50s and 70s. I think a pianette would be sweeter. You'll have to link me in the Discord on what those instruments. That would that would be interesting. Uh, that presses a felt bar on the strings themselves, like when you put a hand on the strings. Is that from the OAOE, Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment? The Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment may have a Luthien video. Or oh, you mean Beethoven's piano? Yes, the Beethoven's piano. Yeah, they have a video on that. Let's see. What else can we talk about keyboard? Okay, so let's talk some pieces that use keyboard instruments really effectively. So you'll find in most pieces the keyboards are going to be grouped together with harp or harps, and if you see piano, almost always you'll see it paired with harp. And a lot of times you'll have piano and yes, ratchet. The Beethoven pedals are in the Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment video. So a lot of times you will see piano paired with celeste, which means you do have to have two players. Orchestras typically only carry one keyboard player, and it's their job to play piano, celeste, harpsichord, harmonium if it ever comes up. Typically, they will not play the organ, though. The organ is a designated player. Just because organ is so different technique-wise from the other instruments. But when you start getting multiple instruments, so piano and celeste at the same time, you do have to have two players. Contrary to what some people think, the celeste player does not cover the percussion section. It's another pianist that comes in to play that part. Same with keyboard glockenspiel. That's going to be a pianist that comes in, not unless you have a percussionist in the section who is a trained pianist. That can sometimes happen, but that is something that is worked out from the personnel standpoint and not from the composer standpoint. So I think a really great piece to look at is one of my all-time favorites, Mahler 8. So Mahler 8 requires 4 keyboard instruments: organ, piano, celeste, and harmonium, as well as 2 harps and mandolin, and preferably a lot of mandolins. I'm sorry, it requires 4 harps. I'm looking here. 4 harps. I forgot it had 4 harps in it, not just 2. But there, as you get toward the end, as you get to the heavenly sections of Mahler 8, he will add in harps and harmonium, celeste, and the piano all together, a lot of times all in unison, and it's a really fantastic effect. I'm looking here at rehearsal 161, and just really continues on. I would really suggest, orchestration-wise, studying Mahler's 8th, the finale, and how he's using celeste and piano and harmonium and organ all together as an ensemble. And really, really effective. Again, another piece to really look at would be Taranga Lila by Messiaen. And this has keyboard glock, celeste, piano, and en Martineau, which is, of course, treated quite differently. What else is really good to look at? Surprisingly, Richard Strauss's Joseph's Legend is good. Piano, celeste, 3 harps. Yeah, and then of course, if you want to look at solo stuff, you're looking at a lot of the piano concertos, as Ratchet says, Rhapsody on a Theme of Paganini, something like that. Yeah, you can see. Most of that stuff though is piano versus orchestra, not piano in the orchestra. A really good piece that I really enjoy that most people don't know is Hector Berlioz's Lelio. Everybody knows Symphony Fantastique. Most people don't realize Symphony Fantastique is only part one of a two-part piece. The other part is Lelio. And Lelio is what happens after the guy from Symphony Fantastique wakes up from his drug-induced state. And it's basically going gaga over Shakespeare. And the finale of Lelio is piano four hands. And it's the first time piano ever gets introduced as an actual orchestral instrument. And you can follow that up with Cézanne's Organ Symphony. The piano part in Cézanne's Organ Symphony, I just absolutely love. That moment in the finale where it just goes to piano four hands. Oh man, that is so cool. You're still not over Taranga Lila. Yeah, that's that's a nice little joke there. All right, so I will take any questions you guys have over any keyboard instruments. If you go super obscure, I may not be able to give a full answer, but otherwise, we've been going about an hour 10, hour 15. And I also want to thank Ratchet earlier today in the Discord. Remind me, it is Thursday. You can do a stream. You saw that when I posted the video for Beautiful Desolation, my new piece, and so oh right, it's Thursday. It's in that time of year when you can't remember what day of the week it is. Not a particular fan. I'm not typically a fan of 12-tone music, but Dalla Piccolo's Sonia di Prigiona has a really cool keyboard part. Has there a Kodai piece with the cimbalom? Yeah. Haryanos has a really important cimbalom part in it. What else has cimbalom? Stravinsky uses it. Piece is it of Stravinsky's? Is it? It's not the Ragtime. Pure Bukti? One of the more obscure Stravinsky pieces uses cimbalom in it, but Haryanos is the big piece with cimbalom. Cimbalom is one of those. It's keyboard. It's percussion. Well, it's not really keyboard, but. Helicopter, I don't know. I will put out some feelers. We may try and do guitars next week. I may talk to my accordion friend. We'll see if we can set up something there. But you'll know as soon as I post it. So just make sure you have the notifications turned on. But anyway, yeah. So if we don't have any more questions, keyboard studies, anything Maslanka. Yeah, Maslanka's piano writing from his symphonies is really fantastic ensemble piano writing. He does it really well. He uses the bass register of the piano really effectively. He couples the bass with the bass and piano with double bass. I don't have an opinion on accordions. Mine. I am not an accordion player. I will talk to my friend Matt, and if he agrees to come on, we will go there. Matt's an accordion guy, but he's also strangely a specialist in the C melody sax and the bass sax. So we may just nerd out there. Anyway, I think we can go ahead and wrap it up tonight. And we'll keep an eye out for the next stream. There is something I will say that is going to be starting very soon, and I'm going to start filming it soon. I am starting a new documentary series, and this is going to take a lot of effort. The guys in the Discord all know about it. But I am going to be doing a multi-part series on the history of the wind band, fully scripted, edited, and multiple location shoots. And I'm just getting the equipment set up for that now. And I hopefully will be shooting some of the first scenes of that within the next few days. And the first episode, I hope to have done by the end of January, will be all on just the basics of the wind band, and then we're going to go chronologically. And I've got the first year of episodes planned out for basically season 1. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. That's always so nice of you that you guys say that. Suddenly plugging the Discord, are we? Hey, the Discord's awesome. I love it. I mean, you guys on there are great, and it's a lot of fun. But anyway, guys, I will see you all next week, and I may upload a few more videos this week, and I'll talk to you all later.